IVM.
Hi, welcome to another episode of a show about crypto with me, Rohan Joshi. I'm still in conversation with the very erudite and very expert Mr. Ashish Singhal. Ashish, we talked about crypto and mining. Now I want to go just a little bit deeper into understanding the bones of cryptocurrency. And the one word that I see coming up a lot is the blockchain. So please tell me more about this blockchain.
Sure.
I feel like if you did a word cloud of all the crypto words that are used in the world, no word comes up more often than blockchain.
Sure.
And I feel like we've covered some of it, but just as a separate, concise thing, what is a blockchain?
Sure. So blockchain is same as a bari khata, a ledger, which say every munshi or every bank manages to write down where we started from, where we are today, what are the balances across the people who are part of this ecosystem, and any transaction that were to happen in the system in the future would get recorded in the same way that anyone who has this ledger or this booklet now can reproduce all the entries. The only difference is that only the person who is writing the entries is not just the in charge of that book. Now, a lot of computers around the world are in charge of that book and decides what goes in it and what gets logged in the system. And that's where trust gets established. So think of it like a ledger, like a book itself, but instead of one person being the authority on writing the entries that Ashish paid $100 to Rohan, now when Ashish pays $100 to Rohan, then hundreds and millions of computers around the world figures out whether this is a right transaction. Right. And if they believe it's a right transaction, 51% of them, then they put it on the book and make it official. Right, and any entry that starts after that would, pile on to this. So it would say, now you transfer $50 back to me. Then it would be after this entry. That first Ashish transferred $100 to Rohan, then Rohan transferred $50 back to Ashish. So Ashish has now $50 and Rohan has now $50.
So again, to take our analogy further, this is basically a mohalla made up of. So all the nosiest, gossipiest neighbors that you have, except these ones deal exclusively in the truth. Like, that's the thing. This is that auntie or that uncle who knows Rohan kahan gaya tha, kiske sath gaya tha, kab gaya tha, kaun sa shirt or kaun sa perfume pehen ke gaya tha, kitna talli wapas aaya, lekin ekdam truthfully. Like,
yes, and they don't have, and their truth needs to be based on incentive, right? ये तो नहीं है कि आप उन्हें रात के 12 बजे बुलाओगे कि यार रोहन क्या कपड़े पहन के गया था, वेरीफाई करो. वो कहेंगे यार मुझे सोने दो, मैं क्यों आऊं, मेरा क्या इंसेंटिव है, right? So ultimately, every transaction that get written on this book, the blockchain incentivizes these computers on participating into the system. So आप मोहल्ले को कभी भी बुला सकते हो, but आप जब भी बुलाओगे आपको उन्हें कुछ इंसेंटिव देना पड़ेगा, and that is their incentive to be truthful, to be part of the system, to validate your transaction. क्योंकि से अगर आप मोहल्ले को बुला रहे हो बार बार, बाद में सब लोग आना छोड़ देंगे, बाद में एक बंदा बचेगा जो हमेशा आएगा, जो आपका बेस्ट फ्रेंड है,
और वो यूजुअली नहीं इधर बेस्ट फ्रेंड होता है या सबसे इरिटेटिंग होता है, लाइक सबसे चीप होता है.
दोनों केस
में वेरी केयरफुल.
Yes, so दोनों केस में system is biased. If there is only one person, then he is the truth bearer. He can say, नहीं यार आशीष ने तो पैसे दिए ही नहीं, और या either he can say, नहीं रोहन को तो पैसे मिले ही नहीं थे, Ashish has to pay again, right? So the more people are there in the system, the more unbiased it becomes. To make more people become part of this ecosystem, the incentive mechanism is built into the blockchain to allow these people to be, now validate every transaction, do it truthfully, and make sure that the system integrity is maintained no matter what happens.
And what is this incentive? If you could explain to me, please, like what is the incentive that is given to, say, somebody who's on the Bitcoin blockchain or on the Ethereum blockchain, for example?
Sure. So let's talk about Bitcoin blockchain. So this is today, it's a block fee that gets released. Every block get mined. What is a block? Block is a combination of transactions. So agar say blockchain pe there are thousands of transactions which are happening every second. So what miners do is they pick not one transaction at a time. They pick say 1,000 transactions at a time. They validate all the transaction and they now try to push it to this book that we talked about. And once that book accepts, then 50% of the people, 51% of the people on the blockchain says, this is right. And they push it to the book. Then the book gives out 6.25 Bitcoin to the person who validated, who helped, validate that this transaction was correct.
Gives out,
So,
like you said, 0.25 Bitcoin to whoever.
6.25 Bitcoin.
6.25 Bitcoin. Okay.
Bitcoin, yes. To the person who helped verifying that record
Right.
on the book. And obviously, that Bitcoin has some value in the market, and that is how he gets that value out of the ecosystem. The second
Got it.
value that he gets is every time I pay you money, there is a small transaction fee that I pay to the ecosystem as well.
Right.
So जो उन 1000 transaction के लिए minor fee दी गई होगी, that also that person gets. So he gets two kind of
Okay.
rewards. One is the block fee. Another is the minor fee paid by each one of the individuals who are making these transactions on the blockchain.
So it is, again, if I had to simplify it, would it be correct to say that it's essentially he's getting a commission from two sources?
Exactly.
Right. One from the larger, like just overall ecosystem, and another sort of smaller bunch of commissions from every transaction that was verified.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you explain the actual use of the word blockchain?
So think of blockchain as a chain, right? As a line where things are getting added up. They're not getting removed. ऐसा नहीं है कि आप लाइन तोड़ के बीच में कहीं घुस जाओगे, right?
Okay.
So it is a line, right? और वो blocks की बनी है. Every block contains transactions, right?
Okay.
So
got it.
Think of it like a ride. There is a roller coaster ride, and there is a line in front of it. Every time somebody wants to ride that roller coaster, they would go at the end of the queue, not in between, because that would mean breaking the system. And every time a miner validates, okay, this person is eligible to ride the roller coaster, they put it at the end of the queue and make sure, give him a unique number that this is where you belong. You are standing behind this guy. So they link it to that and they create a chain that, everybody in the chain knows their position, knows where they stand, and any change in that line can be caught by anybody outside, and they can remove that person from there.
It's the financial equivalent of the human centipede. That's a horrible analogy, but it is what it is. What the transaction fee that you mentioned? What determines this transaction fee, and that's paid out?
Sure. So transaction fee is based on how fast, slow you want your transaction to be approved. Say for an example, let's take that Mohalla wala example again. And you ask people to validate a transaction between Ashish and Rohan. Obviously, the entire Mohalla may not come, right? But you say, ki, okay, I used to pay you 1 rupee for coming to my place and validate transaction, but this time I'm going to pay you $10 each. So more people would show up and more people would have an incentive to validate that transaction. So this is where the transaction fee is determined, is based on your incentive and the incentive of the miner. How do you match that to speed up your transaction on the blockchain? So the more number of transactions are there on the blockchain, you have to pay higher to make sure that your transaction is the one, because उन मोहल्ले वाले को बहुत सारे लोग बुला रहे होंगे, right? To validate their transaction. अब वो कहाँ जाए?
You pay surge pricing. You pay surge pricing, basically.
It's surge pricing.
It's surge pricing. This damn surge pricing is everywhere in my life, and I hate it.
So yes, so this is surge pricing, making sure that you are giving enough incentive to these miners to pick your transaction over the other guy. Right.
On a side note, I just like to point out that this pandemic has gone on for so long that I said the word surge pricing right now, and I actually had a stab of nostalgia for a second because I don't remember the last time there was surge pricing. It's so sad. But no, please continue. I'm done with that little sad nostalgic digression.
No, even when you said surge pricing, I thought of traveling from a club back to my house and remembering that. So yes.
Okay, that's fantastic.
So these transactions are basically like an incentive model, and the more you pay, basically you are saying that please prefer my transaction over the other guys, and please get it confirmed as soon as possible.
Okay. I have one more question for
Sure.
sort of this segment that sort of I feel like would round this out nicely. Is this concept of um, you have exchanges, right? And every financial asset that I can think of pretty much has always had exchanges. But all of these exchanges are centralized. There's one authority. There's and as we've talked about at length of this episode, there's one person that you trust, or there's one entity that you trust, and you believe that it has the protocols to do this. But here, my understanding is that while we're looking at exchanges, these exchanges are also in some way fundamentally decentralized. So how does that work?
Sure. So so what
And
exchange
I
is doing is
apologize in
basically,
advance if any of this is redundant information or ties
no,
into
no,
things that you've
no. That
already explained.
this is an amazing question, to be honest. So, like, a lot of exchange, what an exchange does is, does a set of rules by matching buyers and sellers on both sides and trying to fulfill their orders, right? So, if I'm selling a Bitcoin for $100, I need to find a buyer who will come online and say, "Oh, I have $100 and I am interested in buying Bitcoin at $100." And
Right.
what exchanges do is basically match these two guys, right?
Sure.
And that's what an exchange does. Now, the set of rules, like you rightly pointed out, these are centralized exchanges. We are a centralized exchange as well, where we determine what these rules are, and we
Right.
can change these rules based on how we think the system is evolving, how we think the control of the system should be. But
Give me
the other
again,
part,
just to sort
yeah,
of bring it from an abstract into a specific.
sure,
Give me an
sure,
example of like a rule or a variable that can be changed
sure,
based
sure.
on like your.
Sure, sure. So, say, being a centralized exchange, now, say we say that, oh, from tomorrow we will charge double the amount, right?
Mhm.
Although a decentralized system has also built-in fee infrastructures where they can change any point of time, but it's public, right? That obviously public can decide to move to any other decentralized exchange if they don't like it. But these are the set of rules that are open and out in the public itself, right?
Right.
As a centralized exchange, we have to set up a lot of processes like a KYC process, like various different process, which basically merges the centralized ecosystem of ours to a decentralized ecosystems of cryptocurrencies, right? We still have to comply with tax laws. We still have to comply with know your customer policies, AML, PMLA, FEMA, like hundred of
Right.
rules
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
comply with, right? And that makes the system centralized in a way that now, since you are building that system, you have to make sure that you as a central authority can validate this information and procure it to the government, to the government entities, or wherever it's necessary. As a
Right.
decentralized exchange, I don't have these rules to play with to start with, right? I
Okay.
can simply write a set of rules where a person comes in and as a seller, the other side a buyer, and I simply act as a matchmaking between the two, right? And once that matchmaking is done, the seller gets the Bitcoin, gets the money, buyer gets the Bitcoin, and they go their separate
But
ways.
again, just to be
Altogether.
clear, this
Yeah.
matchmaker, is it a person? Is it an entity? Or is it just the absolute set of rules that are written into the blockchain that just trigger automatically?
Yeah.
I'm trying to
So these
understand.
are yeah. So these are called smart contracts, which are basically a set of rules publicly available. So whenever a seller comes, he goes by these set of rules which are written in the software, which
Okay.
is publicly open and anyone can see. And as a buyer, there would be a set of rules which anybody can come and see those rules as well. And according to these rules, these are getting matched to each other whenever a trade happens. Right
Right.
now, this algorithm is written in a smart contract, which is unchangeable, which is again decentrally controlled. So not a single
Okay.
entity like CoinSwitch would be controlling the smart
Okay.
contract. We might have written that smart contract, but once we have written that smart contract, now it runs in a decentralized way, right?
So
That
again,
I cannot
पूरे
change
मोहल्ले
it
को
any.
भेज दिया. पूरे
हाँ, पूरे
मोहल्ले को
मोहल्ले
भेज
को,
दिया.
yes, exactly,
हाँ.
right? And anything that happens, the entire mohalla has to agree whether it should happen or should not happen, right?
Okay.
Whether while a centralized exchange can take autonomously, can take those decisions, right?
Right.
They
Right.
don't have to call the mohalla whenever they are taking a decision, right? So that's the
Right.
difference between a centralized and a decentralized exchange. There are
Got it.
pros and cons on both. Decentralized exchanges, first of all, it's hard to use, so the liquidity is harder. People have to
Right.
understand the concept of their own wallets, linking their wallets to decentralized exchanges, and then start to trade, right?
So
Which
it is
reduces,
potentially, in a sense, a bunch of experts navigating
yes,
and
yes,
negotiating
yes,
with other experts as
yes.
opposed to casual users.
Yes, exactly. Right. And that is why the demand and supply reduces on these decentralized exchanges. And when
Mhm.
demand and supply reduces, it causes spread, it causes worse rates, or, the lack of order book that it is. While on centralized exchanges, by the nature of it, since a lot of people are going there and buying and selling, the demand and supply ratio itself creates that liquidity, which is much, much higher than a
Right.
decentralized exchange overall, right? But not to discourage decentralized exchanges, there are amazing innovations happening in that front, which we can probably talk about later, which are called
Oh, absolutely.
automatic
Yes.
yeah, which are called AMMs, and there are amazing mathematical models that they have come up with to solve this exact problem.
Great. Now, sort of moving on to the other thing that we discussed is so we're talking about the blockchain, and we're talking about all these things that the blockchain can potentially be used for. And a word that I see come up very, very often as, I mean, something that is extolled as the power of the blockchain is its ability to handle something called smart contracts. And I'm trying to understand what these smart contracts are. First, to be clear, the use of the contract here is not in the exact same way that we use the word legally binding contract, because that is everybody's first understanding of the word contract, I think. Like we immediately think two lawyers with a piece of paper. And this is not exactly the same as that. It's not necessarily, we're not talking about a legally binding document necessarily.
To be honest, you can equate it to a legally binding document. Obviously,
Okay,
not two lawyers are signing it, but you're
sure.
putting a set of rules outside which can be
Okay,
validated by anyone,
right,
which anyone who becomes part of it needs to adhere to. And you as a company or you as a developer has said that these are the rules that I will play by, right?
right,
So these are legally binding in a terms that these are mathematically binding, or these are bind by the blockchain itself. So rather than
right.
going to a court in case somebody is in not in uh, not following that contract, you simply, the blockchain would reject those users or those activities right out, because the rules are already part of the blockchain of the smart contract itself.
So in a sense, something that happens on like a smart contract on that blockchain, to use an analogy, you're almost removing the need for a court, right? Where you're
Yeah.
removing the need to have to go there, plead your case at all, and then have somebody mediate it, in the sense that here, this is a system that already just like, but this condition is met, this condition is met, this condition is met, and that's that. Like
Exactly,
there's just
exactly. So,
there's nothing to arbitrate, there's nothing to
yes,
listen to. There's
yes,
this,
yes.
and one of like, and again, this is something that I wanted to know from an expert, because when I was trying to read up about this myself, a sentence that I came across is that, and I think this is on the Ethereum, this is in the Ethereum white paper, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
which is that one of the simplest ways of trying to understand a smart contract is to think of a vending machine as the earliest
Yeah.
sort of smart contract, right? Which is that there is a bunch of pre-programmed instructions,
Yes.
and when once certain coin conditions are met,
Mhm.
um, the thing has to come out.
Exactly.
Again, how simplistic is that? Is that way too simplistic?
No, I think that is a very good analogy, and you can take an example of a lift as well, right? When you press a
Right.
button, you don't know what is happening, but you know that if I press a down button, then the lift would try to figure out what the demand is, where it should be, and try to reach there. Irrespective whether I press the button or you press the button, there is no bias in the system. Which floor you
Okay.
are at, there is no bias. There are a set of rules which are getting applied equally to everyone, and it will reach there when it reaches there, right? So that's how a smart contract could be thought out as well, a set of instructions which are equal for everyone, and blockchain ensures that it remains equal, because any
Okay.
execution is again gets validated by the rules of the blockchain itself.
But this smart contract still has to be agreed between two people, right? In the sense that, for example, if the smart contract is written in there, um, how do I know what the terms of the contract are before I sort of enter into the executable part of it? Like, say, for example, smart contract has something written that says that when this happens,
Mhm.
one ETH goes to this person. I'm just
Mhm.
like
Sure.
putting it out of there, right? So when I walk into this, and I suddenly look back and go, hey, where did that one ETH go? How do I know that I'm within a smart contract?
Sure. So smart contracts are verifiable, are open source. You can read through the structure. So the rules are already out. It's like the contract is already out. So when I am getting into a contract, so it's like a terms and condition that I need
Right.
to go through. Make
But
sure that I
nobody
understand.
reads that. But nobody reads those.
So a lot of users simply assume that these things are already validated. Say if Apple does something wrong in their terms and condition, I'm not saying they are, but say
Right.
they try to do something wrong, then there are a set of people who would already caught hold of it and they will hold them accountable. As a
Right.
user, although I should do my research and I should make sure
Right.
that I'm not signing something which I'm not supposed to, but as a user, obviously based on limited understanding, limited time, I cannot do that to the best of my knowledge, right?
Right.
So the idea here is that since it is a public document, it can be validated by everyone. And since
Okay.
there are a lot of users, at least one of them would have taken the effort to read
True.
or to go through it. And if there is some problem, he would have raised his voice
Okay.
in making sure that it doesn't happen, right? But it need not to say that there could be the contracts could be biased as well. The
Sure.
contracts could be incorrect as well. You can launch a wrong smart contract. There could be bugs in the logic itself. All those
Right.
things we are still prone to. It's just that the whatever it is out in the public, and it is for the
Right.
public to see, validate, and choose whether they want to deal with it or not.
Okay. So give me an example of a smart contract between, say, you and me.
Sure.
Like if we had to, and like just sort of walk me through how that would be created,
Mhm.
how I would enter into that with you, and then sort of what would happen.
Sure, sure. So on blockchain, Rahul and Ashish are representative of an address, right?
Right.
Of a wallet,
Yep.
which private keys is owned by, say, Ashish wallet is obviously owned by Ashish, and Rohan's
Yeah.
private key is owned by Rohan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So to use any contract, first we need to establish two parties, right? How do we
Right.
establish as party one and party two? Is by owning the rights to that address. And now that
Sure.
public address is a representation of Rohan and Ashish on blockchain.
Right.
Now, say we write a code, we write a smart contract saying, okay, if Rohan pays Ashish 1 Bitcoin, Ashish has to pay 10 Ethereum to Rohan,
Right.
right? And
Right.
say that to start the transaction, Ashish need to deposit X amount of Ether onto this address. Rohan has to deposit Y amount of Bitcoin on this address. And any day, Rohan or Ashish can simply exchange that currency by executing that contract, right?
Right.
So now
Got it.
contract has all the information, and any day you want to execute it, you send them a signed transaction through your public key and through your private key. Now blockchain
Right.
understands, oh, Rohan has given me this instruction. Let me go and execute this contract. Rohan says, give me 1 Bitcoin worth of Ether. Blockchain goes, applies the set of rules, look at the exchange rate, takes the money from Ashish's contract and give it to Rohan and give Bitcoin to Ashish. Now, Ashish can trust that there is no shady business going in between because Ashish
Okay.
has read the contract as well and Rohan has
Sure.
read the contract as well.
I
So
mean, yeah,
both
okay,
of
sure.
them.
Let's go with your version. Yeah, Rohan's read the contract as well. Sure, why not?
So it will make sure that the both parties are satisfied. Both parties agree to a set of rules. They are representative by their addresses, their wallets onto the blockchain, and they can now send instructions and receive instructions from these smart contracts through the way of signing through their
Right.
private key on the blockchain. So there are a lot of wallets which allow these signings, these transactions to happen. So
Right.
it's not as complex as I'm explaining now, but
Okay.
this is what happens on actually on any smart contract.
Okay, fantastic. I feel like I understand that a lot better now. Okay, just to recap, we're looking at a new class of currency, or well, at least a new sort of asset whose value and whose legitimacy is defined by a large group of people as opposed to one centralized authority. What this does is it introduces multiple layers of transparency because you now have multiple records from whom you can go and verify any transaction that you made. No one person can, for better or for worse, tamper with that, or I mean, they can tamper with that, but everybody else would have a record of the untampered one to compare it against. So that person would get caught out pretty quickly. This all happens on the blockchain, which is a hugely decentralized, spread out across multiple users, sare mohalle ke paas hai thing that then helps verify your transactions. This is the future, is my understanding. It is my understanding. And I think that's a reasonably cool place that at least I feel like I've understood a little more about the basic concept of cryptocurrency. And I think that gives me enough of a platform to talk more specifically about coins like Bitcoin and what that project means. So thank you, Ashish. This has been extremely educational. Thank you for being extremely patient with your analogies and humoring some of my stupider questions. It is entirely possible that we will see you on this show again, still breaking your head trying to explain concepts to me. But thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon. And is there anything else you'd like to say before you leave?
Rohan, you've covered it beautifully, and I love the interaction. I think the basics of crypto still need to be heard, understood by the Indian population, and there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of preconceived notion that comes into this entire ecosystem because of the stance of government, RBI, and different things. But there is other part of crypto which is about understanding what a crypto is and letting people choose whether it is good or bad, rather than defining by the authorities itself whether it is good or bad. Right. So that's the whole point of decentralization. Power is in the hands of the people, right? And they need to decide whether it would become a good system or it would give more towards building a better world or a not a better world,
of course,
in the future. And the power is to the people itself, right?
The way I see it right now, we're in the Wild West. There's a lot of myth, there's a lot of fact. And over the next, many months, let's hope that we can separate as much of the myth and the fact of the Wild West and see where we go from here.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks a lot, Rohan, for this. Yeah.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine. And thank you for everybody who listened in. I hope this was educational. I hope it was useful. Please feel free to write in and tell me how this can be easier to understand or how we can simplify this further. Other than that, thank you so much for listening to a show about crypto with Rohan Joshi on the IVM podcast app, website, or wherever else you're getting your podcast from. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the Edge and Sledges Cricket Podcast, in the first half, Ashwin is joined by Varun to wrap India's ODI tour of Sri Lanka. In the second half, DJ joins the party to discuss the first T20 international between India and Sri Lanka. If you'd like to hear more about this match, former Indian cricketer Sabha Karim joins Rajiv Mishra on Khel Niti and they talk some more about it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're really excited to announce a new show, a show about crypto with Rohan Joshi. He's going to dive deep and demystify all this crypto stuff that we've been hearing about. And let me tell you a little bit more about stuff that's going on the network really quickly. Congratulations to Maru Kinayat, who celebrates 50 episodes of The Note with a discussion on health as a fundamental right. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to Harsha Chetanwala of mywealthgrow.com. Zarina Poonawala is starting a new miniseries on emotional intelligence. Do check out the kickoff episode on the Empowering series. And Simplified talks about semiconductors. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show, or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. That's really helpful for us. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors on the network this week. They make this all possible. Thank you very much. Ciet, Cred, Global Victoria, Bank of Baroda, Intuit India, Lenovo, and CoinSwitch Kuber. We really appreciate your support.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.